Assistive Instructional Technology Quadrilateral Lesson Plan. This lesson is on the properties of quadrilaterals, looking at the sides, angles, and diagonals of a parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, square, trapezoid, and kite. Students will determine the most precise name for the quadrilateral, given a picture or a list of properties. The second focus of this lesson is to review for a quiz on the previous lessons in the unit given so far. This lesson is designed for a high school geometry class in the team setting made up of 9th and 10th grade students. Half the students in the class have an IEP for a specific learning disability, emotional disability, or other health impairment. This lesson covers G.9 and G.10 SOLs, where the students will verify characteristics of quadrilaterals and use properties of quadrilaterals to solve real-world problems. They'll also solve real-world problems involving the angles of polygons. This is a list of the materials needed to conduct this lesson. At the beginning of the 90-minute block, students will listen to The Adventures of Rom, a PowerPoint story projected on the screen in the classroom. Following the story, there will be a small group discovery activity in which each group, and the groups would be approximately 4 students, and there's 6 shapes, so depending on how many students in the class, you can organize it. And then there will be several things that they can do to explore their assigned shape. So there's a Math Fun website interactive tool. There are also 2D shapes, and they can measure them with rulers and mark what they find out on the actual large 2D shapes. They're on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And there is a quadrilateral rules exploration sheet stapled to these 2D shapes, and they have questions for them to guide them in their investigation of their quadrilateral. After each group fills out their rules exploration sheet, they will then select one person to present what they found out, and the whole group will record their results in the properties of quadrilateral chart. Once the quadrilateral chart is made and the 2D shapes, are posted on a bulletin board, the students will use that information to create a quadrilateral flipbook. And at the end of the activity, approximately 50 minutes long, there will be an assessment in the form of a Venn diagram. This is an interactive quadrilateral. This is the Math is Fun website interactive tool. And students are to use this to figure out on this page if you want to give that a tag attached to their assigned shape to investigate. Parallelogram has been selected, and the sides button has been selected as well. And when this is selected, it puts the measurements of each of the sides. Notice that the opposite sides are the same here, and the opposite sides are here. So therefore, the opposite sides are congruent. But what happens if you have a shape that looks like the opposite way? Okay, it's still a parallelogram, and you can see that the congruency of the opposite sides maintains no matter what kind of parallelogram you make. So students would then deselect the sides, and they could look at angles. Opposite angles here are congruent, and opposite angles here are congruent. Again, they can manipulate the shape and see if that is indeed the case for their shape. Back to the sides, you can also check for whether the sides are parallel or not using the graph paper. You just have to manipulate these buttons so you can get your shape to match up with the lines on the graph paper. There we go. So notice that they line up with this line, or almost. You can make them, and you can see that this one is consistently here on the bottom. So therefore the opposite sides are parallel. Diagonals can be seen, and you can actually see all three characteristics at once if you want to turn them all on. So here again, sides, angles, diagonals. You select another shape if you want to investigate more on your own, hit reset, and it will give you one to start in the middle. So the second part of the lesson will be a review for an upcoming quiz on this lesson and the previous 2 lessons in the unit. And it will be in the form of a PowerPoint geometry Jeopardy game. Adaptations to online activities. In the Jeopardy activity, the vocabulary is lined with visual cues, so there's pictures and there's markings. The Jeopardy activity will be read aloud for the students, and it features colors, pictures, sounds, animations, text, and can be adjusted if necessary for sensory sensitive students. Students play the game in groups, and they work together to come with an answer. Instead of raising their hand, they raise a mini whiteboard in the air to signal they want to answer. And answers are flashed on the mini whiteboard so that if it's incorrect, another team can try to steal the points. The storybook activity is also aligned with visual cues and color, and it's in a story format that aids in the memory of how to organize and name quadrilaterals. It is also read aloud to the students. Adaptations to the offline activities. The Venn diagram assessment can be altered to be given verbally. For example, the student can explain it in the PowerPoint storybook format. Students can also create the Venn diagram from the PowerPoint storybook using cutout shapes of the quadrilaterals in the story. Answer choices will be paired with visuals. Question and answer choices are read aloud. Text, font size, color of the quiz can be altered for those with a visual impairment or sensory issues. The 2D Polygon shapes can be created with foam paper to help students with impaired gross motor skills. And students with assistive technology communication device, of course, can use them to present answers in typing, and a teacher can write their answers down for them. These are links in the PowerPoint attached to the Geometry Jeopardy game and to the adventures. This is an example of the offline activity, the 2D shape and exploration sheet. This is the chart that the students fill out after the exploration and presentation. The colors are consistent for the yeses and the nos. This is an example of the flip chart offline activity. If you notice on the right side, sides, angles, and diagonals are consistently represented for each page you turn to, and the colors used to mark the sides, angles, and diagonals are also consistently red, purple, and green. This is an example of the offline activity, the Venn diagram assessment that the students take at the end of the first half of the class period, or a little over the first half of the class period. This is the homework activity. It's a quadrilateral fact sheet that the students follow the directions and fill out, mark with the appropriate symbols the properties of the quadrilaterals. In addition to the homework, there's a Blackboard page and all the keys and the PowerPoints. In addition to an extra video are posted as resources for students to utilize while doing their homework. The extra video that was not in class is helpful because during block periods, often students do not start their homework, or at least not all students start their homework the day of the lesson, and sometimes they need a review. So there's an 10-minute video also on quadrilaterals that they can review as well. So online and offline activities are connected. The PowerPoint storybook, the conclusion of the story results in a Venn diagram. So there's a story format, ends in a Venn diagram, and then the offline Venn diagram is then their formative assessment to monitor understanding at the conclusion of the offline activities. Then after the storybook was used to introduce the lessons, the students used offline activities to investigate the quadrilaterals and fill out their properties quadrilaterals chart to organize data. And then the data was used to create a flip book of how the students review the properties of different types of quadrilaterals and how to best name them. Then the online storybook was then reintroduced at the end of the offline activities for students to make the connections between their investigations and their pictures in their offline activities with the pictures in the storybook about Rom and his trip to Camp Quadrilateral. The Polygon Review Jeopardy game is an online activity, and it's a fun way for students to make connections to the concepts that they've learned in the first 3 days of this unit for an upcoming quiz the next class period. And both of the online and offline activities utilize mostly pictures and color to highlight properties of quadrilaterals.